All right, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. So inshallah, if the kids can all sit down, we don't want to turn this into EHT, okay? Every 5 minutes, please be quiet. All right, so we're going to go through a hadith, a few different points, but the theme is the same, inshallah, but just talk about a few different hadith. In a hadith that's collected in the Musnad of Ahmed and in the Sunan of Ibn Majah, Irbad ibn Sariya radiallahu anhu, he narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, قَدْ تَرَكْتُكُمْ عَلَى الْبَيْضَاءِ لَيْلُهَا كَنَهَارِهَا. I have left you upon a path whose night is as clear as its day. And what is this path that the Prophet ﷺ left behind is, of course, the path of Islam. So, its night is as clear as its day. Meaning, in other words, there's no confusion. Nothing in Islam is confusing. No concept of Islam should be in doubt. There's enough information and enough clarity in this religion that anyone who understands it, or rather, there is nothing preventing someone from understanding it properly. All right, the night its night is as clear as its day. لا يزيغ عنها بعد إلا هالك. No one will deviate away from it after me, meaning after his death, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, except the one who is doomed. So only the one who is destined for destruction will split from the ideas or the understanding of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. من يعش منكم فسيرى اختلافا كثير. Whoever among you or whoever lives longer than me, after I'm gone, lives to see the rest of life or whatever, you will see that there will be a lot of ikhtilaf, a lot of differing and conflict. So this is something that the Prophet ﷺ prophesied will happen after he passes away. There will be a lot of disagreement among the Muslims, a lot of ikhtilaf, infighting, arguments, so on and so forth. And of course all of us, even the one who is blind, can hear the state of the ummah today. Lots of ikhtilaf, right? Everywhere you go, Muslims are in disagreement, fighting, abusing one another, and so on and so forth. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he gave an advice after giving this warning that this is what's going to happen. فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِمَا عَرَفْتُم مِّن سُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ. Upon you, or obligated upon you, is what you know of my sunnah and what you know of the sunnah of al-Khulafa al-Rashidun. So he told us the problem, right? First he gave us the good news that he has left behind a path whose night is as clear as its day. So there is absolutely nothing in Islam that we should be confused about, right? There's nothing in the Quran or authentic hadith. Then he gave the warning that you will see a lot of differing and a lot of fighting and this and that after I'm gone. However, there is a solution. It's an obligation upon you that you stick to my sunnah, what you know of my sunnah, my way, and the sunnah of al-Khulafa al-Rashidun. And of course the Khulafa al-Rashidun, the rightly guided Khulafa, meaning Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali radiallahu anhu. These four. So any fatwa or any verdict that they passed out, it legally is binding upon us. So that's part of the Sharia. So the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and also the sunnah of these four Khulafa al-Rashidun. So here, of course, we live in times of turmoil. There's ikhtilaf everywhere, right? Even in this city, so much ikhtilaf. not just the city, in just one masjid there is so much ikhtilaf. This is the reality of the ummah, right? There's, the brothers in the back, inshallah, if you can drink your tea quietly. So there's a lot of differences among us. However, we'll find out who is right, who is wrong, if we just go back and check with the Quran and Hadith, right? Then we'll know. Because somebody's arguing, I'm right, he's arguing, he's right. It could be that both of us are wrong. Or it could be one of us is right. Or it could be both of us are correct, right? But we will never know unless we patiently go back to the Quran and authentic Sunnah. And not just in any way, but we have to go to the Quran and Sunnah as the Prophet ﷺ understood, as his companions understood. Now someone can obviously come and say, well, why do we have to follow the Prophet and his Sahaba's understanding, right? Like, why can't we just, let's say, open the Quran, open a Hadith, whatever I think is the understanding or the meaning, why can't I go with it? Because this is something that the Prophet ﷺ obviously clarified. And not just the Prophet ﷺ, but Allah Himself has told us in the Quran that we have to follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. Like for example, in one ayah in Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ. And the first to embrace Islam from the Muhajirun, who are the people of Mecca that migrated to Medina, and the Ansar, meaning the Muslims of Medina. So how much more direct do you want Allah to be? Right? He says Muhajirun and the Ansar. So وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ. And all those who follow them, who follow the Muhajirin, who follow the Ansar. Not just any way, bi-ihsan, perfectly, in the best way. So, in order to succeed, and what's the right path? As Allah says, the path of the Muhajirun and the Ansar. This is an ayah from the Quran. This is not something that people made up, right? Every single Muslim on the face of this earth knows exactly who the Muhajirun were and who the Ansar were. Everybody knows this, right? So Allah tells us clearly that those Muhajirun and the Ansar and وَالَّذِينَ تَبَعُوهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ, and everyone else who follows them in perfection, بِإِحْسَانٍ, in the best way, not a half job, but in the best way. Then for them, رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. Then Allah, they are pleased with Allah and Allah is pleased with them. So here it is an ayah from the Quran where Allah is directly saying, I am pleased with the Muhajirun and I am pleased with the Ansar. Right? This is what Allah is saying. And indirectly or directly, He's saying anyone who follows the Muhajirun and the Ansar, I'm also pleased with them. So Allah is the one who tells us that this is the way to follow. This is the way to approach your religion. This is the way to understand the Quran. And this is the way to understand the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَأَعْدَ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا. So if you are able to do so, Allah, you are pleased with Allah and Allah is pleased with you. Not only that, then Allah has promised gardens under which rivers flow, meaning this is paradise. This is the promise of Allah. ذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. And this is the greatest success. So this is a profound ayah. One ayah that solves the entire Muslim Ummah's problems, if people were to implement it. That you have ikhtilaf here, this group there, this group here, so many different groups, so many different madahib, so many different aqa'id, right? So many different beliefs and so on and so forth. But how do we know who is right, who is wrong? It's not based on me and you, or my masjid and your masjid, no. What did the Muhajirun and the Ansar? How did they understand the Quran? How did they understand Hadith? then if you follow them, this is the pleasing way to Allah, and Allah has promised Jannah for those people. And this was the Aqidah, and Aqidah meaning belief, the creed. And Aqidah comes from uqd, which is a knot. When you tie a knot, this is in Arabic uqd, right? Let's say when you get married, what do you call the thing? The marriage contract. Aqd al-nikah, right? So that's what it is. The thing that is binding. It's a knot that binds you to certain thing, to something. So when you get married, whether you're displeased after a few years or not, you're bound to that woman and she's bound to you, right? So the Aqidah of Islam, this is that knot that binds you, that ties you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the Aqidah. That you believe in the right things, in the right way, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran. So you have the correct beliefs regarding Allah, His angels, His books, His messengers, life after death, the qadr, and every other issue of al-ghayb, and so on and so forth. That your belief, your understanding is in the right way. So that's the Aqidah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us here that the right aqidah, right approach, right belief is the way of the Muhajirun and the Ansar. Because they took this from the Prophet ﷺ directly. So we have this ayah. Then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in a hadith that's collected in Bukhari and Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ said that خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. The best of mankind, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ, the best of all people, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي, my generation, my people, which is the Sahaba. And we know this. Allah even mentioned in the Quran, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. Everybody knows this ayah. Allah is directly referring to the Sahaba, that they are the best human beings to be raised up by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is also from our belief of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. The best of Bani Adam, the best of people from the children of Adam are number one, the Anbiya wa Rusul. Right? The prophets and messengers. They're the best of Adam's children, alayhi salam. After the prophets and messengers is the Sahaba of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Right? The only level above the Sahaba is a prophet or messenger. So they are basically, no human's going to be a prophet or messenger except for those who have already passed. So the Sahaba are the best that it gets among the rest of humanity. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ directly said. خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي. The best of people are my generation. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. Then the next. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. Then the next, and he stopped there. So the first three generations of Muslims are the best of the Muslims. And if you think about it, look through history, during those first three generations of Islam is when the Muslims spread far north, south, east, west. All the success that we are still enjoying was because what Allah gave those first three generations of Muslims. Whether you look at all the way to parts of Europe, to India, China, to the West and Maghrib and this and that. All of this was by the Sahaba and the Tabi'un and the Tabi'un. The first three generations. They're the ones who expanded Islam far and wide. And also look at the amount of scholarship that there was during those first three generations. If we were to compare the ulama today, we can count them. But they were everywhere, right? Even barbers knew what was going on about the deen. There's a reason why I'm saying this. When Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah went for a hajj, after you finish, you get a head shave, right? So there was a fiqhi issue that he was talking with the other person sitting next to him, and the one who was shaving his head gave him a hadith, and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah changed his verdict right there. He's a barber. No, we don't even know his name, right? But that was the knowledge of the Muslim Ummah. Doesn't matter who's where, everyone had ilm because they were busy learning their religion. They knew from right from wrong. Islam was protected through their hands. So this is in the Arabic language. This first three generations of Muslims in Arabic, they are known as Salaf al-Salihin, the righteous predecessors, right? And this is very important that we understand these terminologies, especially in our day and age, because the media make up lies, and unfortunately many Muslims, majority of the Muslims today, they don't understand the language. Their mother tongue is not Arabic. So many times simple Arabic words, they get confused because someone else gives them a wrong understanding and he doesn't care to go check, right? And this is what happens. Like many times, people, due to ignorance, if they hear this word Salaf and this and, oh no, they're like the boogeyman. No, a'udhu billah, right? There is no way any Muslim can go to Jannah except by following the Salaf, which is the Sahaba. How are you going to go to Jannah if you don't follow the Sahaba's understanding? There's no way you can go to Jannah, right? And this is what exactly all the four Imams as we know them, from Imam Abu Hanifa to Malik to Shafi'i and Imam Ahmed, all four of them, rahimahumullah, had the exact same aqeedah. This was the belief. You will never find any of those four having a different belief from this belief. And this is what in general is known as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. The people of Sunnah and the Jama'ah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? This is what it is. But unfortunately, due to confusion, lack of information, there is so much ikhtilaf, just like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that you are going to see, Man ya'ish minkum fasayara ikhtilafan kathira. Whoever lives after me, you're going to see lots of differences. Lots of differences. But when that happens, then فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِمَا عَرَفْتُم مِّن سُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ. So this is the solution that people don't want to put into practice. So everything that you do, it has to be in line with the way of the Salaf, the first three generations of Muslims, right? So even if you don't remember, let's say the Arabic terminology of As-Salaf al-Salihin, but at least you remember in whatever language your mother tongue is, that the first three generations of Muslims, they're the best ones. Good enough, right? That if you know this, and if people ask the proof, we have the ayah, we have hadith from Bukhari and Muslim, that the Prophet ﷺ is saying that the best of the people are his Sahaba. And no one in his right mind, if you told people, if someone says, I think this such and such should be the way to do something, and then you told that person, well, here's an authentic source saying that Abu Bakr said the meaning of the ayah is such and such. There is no Muslim in his right mind who's going to say, I don't care what Abu Bakr has to say, I'm going to go with what I said. No one's going to do this except the Shia, right? No one from the Sunni Ummah will ever say such a thing or even do it. Ignorantly maybe they do it, but once the knowledge comes, no one will dare to say, I know better than Abu Bakr, or I know better than Umar, or I know better than Uthman and Ali. No one's going to say this. So this is all what it is, that this idea, this manhaj, this way, this understanding, this is what we follow, or we have to follow. This is the goal, that we want to follow Islam in this understanding. Like let's say, for example, in many parts of the Ummah, so many Muslims, they even make tawaf around graves. Right? So many places. And if you ask a person, did the Prophet ﷺ do this? They'll say no. Did Abu Bakr do such a thing? They'll say no. Umar, Uthman, name any Sahaba, they'll say no, 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 no. Then why are you doing it? If this was the understanding of Islam, then why didn't they do it? And Allah has already told us they're in paradise. We already know that these companions are in paradise, right? And you think about it, brothers and sisters, no one can say Sheikh Fulan is in Jannah. No one. But we have dalil from the Quran and Sunnah. Abu Bakr is already in Jannah. He's in Jannah. Umar is in Jannah. Uthman is in Jannah. Ali is in Jannah. We know this for a fact. So look how simple Allah made our religion. Just like the Prophet ﷺ said, that I am leaving behind a path whose night is as clear as its day. All you have to do is just open the book and read a little bit and you get the understanding. You get the answers. That's how simple this religion is. But people make it complicated because they're ignorant and they're full of kibr, arrogance. No one likes to be wrong. That's the problem. But if you look at the scholars, they found no shame in someone correcting them. This is the way, a sign of someone who really has knowledge. If someone corrects him with dalil, he'll put a smile on his face and he'll be happy. Oh, Jazakallah khair, you educated me about something that I didn't know. But the ignorant person is the one who starts debating and arguing no matter how much you show. Even you might open Sahih al-Bukhari and put it in his front of his face. No, I'm not wrong. You're younger than me, you're wrong. Right? This is how people will argue. But this is not the way of the sincere seeker of knowledge. That you have to stick to that understanding. And even in hadith, like someone can argue, well, what is it? Where do we find this word salaf or this or that? And as I said, linguistically meaning, salaf is just something that passes, your ancestors. You ask anybody who's an Arab, their great-grandparents, they'll say, yeah, this is the salaf of my family. This is common. Everybody knows this. That's all what this word means. That your ancestors, something that has passed. Right? Something that has passed. But then when we use the terminology Salaf al-Salihin, we're specifically referring to the righteous ancestors, those first 3 generations of Muslims. Right? And then even from hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ was in his fatal illness, and all his wives came to visit him, and also Fatima radiallahu anha, she visited. And this is a hadith collected in both Bukhari and Muslim that Aisha radiallahu anha narrated. So as the Prophet ﷺ was in that state of weakness, his soul about to depart at any moment, he called his daughter, Fatima radiallahu anha, and he whispered 2 times to her. The first time, as Aisha narrates, Fatima radiallahu anha started crying. And then when the Prophet whispered to her a second time, she smiled. So as Fatima was walking out of the room, Aisha radiallahu anha, she was keen on knowledge. She grabbed her. What did your father say for which you cried and then you laughed? And she didn't say it. And she said, if my father passes, then I'll tell you. And then of course after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, Aisha radiallahu anha still remembered. She wanted to know. So she approached Fatima, and then Fatima said that the first time when I cried is because my father told me that Jibreel alayhi salam comes once a year to review the Quran with me. But this time he came marratain, twice. So I believe my time to meet Allah has arrived. So at that moment, obviously this is Fatima radiallahu anha, she started crying. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he reminded her that fattaqillah, have the taqwa of Allah, wasbiri, and be patient. Why? فَإِنَّهُ نِعْمَ السَّلَفُ أَنَا لَكِ. I am the best ni'mah, the best salaf for you. Directly using this word. That I am the best ancestor for you. So the Fatima radiallahu anha was weeping at this moment, that she understood her father was going to pass away. But he gave this good news as well. And then Aisha asked, then why did you smile and laugh the second time he whispered? Because he said the second time, you will be the first to follow me. And we know from the Sunnah, she died within 6 months of the Prophet's death. So that's why she smiled. And not only that, he said, you will be the first to follow me, and you will be the leader of all women in Jannah. So that's why she smiled. So subhanallah, but as in relation to the topic of our subject, the topic of our lecture, so we see clearly here the Prophet ﷺ in this authentic hadith reported in both Bukhari and Muslim, he clearly told Fatima radiallahu anha that فَإِنَّهُ نِعْمَ السَّلَفُ أَنَا لَكِ, that I am the best of the salaf for you. So this is all what it means, ancestor, the one who has passed. So for us as Muslims, the best of our ancestors, we have to follow the way of the Sahaba, the Muhajirun and the Ansar. This is how you solve problems. This is how you, any type of dispute you might see. The one who is wise, he goes back to the Quran and Sunnah And not in any way, because let's say you had these people, and of course we understand they're between the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah knows best their fate. But these people who have died, we know who they are over the past 10, 15, 20 years, calling to violence, right? The same ayat from the Quran, they used it to destroy Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, and all these other countries, Yemen, right? The same ayat in the Quran that was recited by the Prophet and his companions. But we can easily say this is a wrong understanding, because this was not the interpretations of the Prophet and his companions. This was not the interpretation of the Salaf. The way you guys are explaining these verses, never did the Prophet ﷺ or the Sahaba explain the verses in this manner. So this is how we know. This is what the Prophet ﷺ left behind. Its night is as clear as its day. And you look at these Khawarij, those who joined Daesh or ISIS, majority of their soldiers are European converts. Like yesterday he was a rapper and bouncer at some nightclub. Today he took a shahada, and tomorrow he's in a plane to Syria. So when did he get the time to learn his religion? Right? He didn't. Absolutely newbies. Has no time whatsoever to even learn Arkan al-Iman, and they're the ones who went and joined them. Or you look at in other places, when they found young Muslims, male and female, coming from Muslim families, and then they get attracted to these type of extremists. But you look at those young people, maybe they're 20, 21 years old, doesn't matter. If you look at their history, that Muhammad and Fatima never was a practicing Muslim until just 3 weeks ago. And then met somebody on Facebook who convinced him and her to go there. That's the history and the story of every single one of them. Ignorant people, jahil people who don't know their religion. Either it's a new Muslim who just took the shahada, or it's a person who lived a life of ignorance his whole life, but then alhamdulillah had an awakening that I have to be a better Muslim. But you have to learn, right? And this is what we tell a lot of our young brothers and sisters, right? This is a problem that they create within their own house. Maybe you didn't know much about Islam yesterday. Today you learn something, and then tomorrow you start abusing your parents. It will never work. It will never work. Especially when your parents know every single dark history of yours since the day you were born. It shouldn't be like this, but unfortunately this is how shaitan makes the situation. So you always have to use hikmah, right? Maybe you know something, and you know, okay, khalas, qadar Allah. And there are many examples like this. I personally know so many young brothers and sisters, maybe they were into drugs and all sorts of things in high school because they didn't have guidance. They didn't have the education in their own home. They didn't have a connection to the masjid. Or even if they had a masjid, it wasn't really appealing to them or teaching them even the basics, right? So they didn't have the resources, is what I mean. Then all of a sudden they realize, wait, this is not the path that I should be living as a Muslim. Let me do something. And then they learn a few things, watch a few YouTube videos, read a few articles, and then they start debating with their family immediately, right? And then what do our parents do? Which is also wrong. 5 years ago, I know what you did. This is what parents do. Which as parents, please don't do this with your children, right? Don't do this. Past is past. If you know that they have changed, they made tawbah, this is against Islam that you remind people of their sins, right? I know it can be tough sometimes. Focus on just now. I'm sure your kids have messed up plenty in the past week. Just focus on that. You don't have to bring in 10 years ago history or 5 years ago history. This is not the way you will build a relationship. But anyways, so you have to be patient. You have to, let's suppose you learn something and your family is ignorant about it. You want to teach them. Fine. At this moment, you're not the best person to explain this. But you know your parents respect somebody else in the community. Let him handle it. ask a question. Like create a situation very politely where that problem might rise up, and your parents will actually ask the question to someone that they respect. And they get the answer from that person, not you. Right? So you are still getting the message across to your parents or any other family member, whatever may be the case, but you're using hikmah and doing it in a right way, and you're also preserving the bond of kinship. Right? So this is how you do this. Use this wisdom, inshallah ta'ala. But the point is, so going back, that we have to follow these first 3 generations of Muslims. And what does it mean that when we say that you follow them? You follow them just as a label, as a claim, it's a verbal lip service that you offer, or does it mean you follow it all the way through? So when you say that you follow, or you're trying to follow the first 3 generations of Muslims, when it comes to aspects of Iman, aspects of belief, you believe in what they believed in. You learn and you learn that aqidah. When it comes to amal, practices, you practice things their way. Let's say you want to pray like I did a few weeks back, using hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. This is how he prayed from A to Z. So this is how you want to do things. If you want to fast in Ramadan, you get all those hadith. What did the Prophet do, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What did the Sahaba do? How did they make Hajj? How did they make Umrah? How did they give Zakat? So any aspect of Islam, when it comes to practicing, you simply just go back and see the guidelines. What did they do? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and those first 3 generations of Muslims. That's the way I want to practice the religion. So your iman, your aspects of belief, your actions. And then there's a third aspect, which is akhlaq, your manners, your adab. Because this is something many times people forget. Right? You'll find people, mashallah, they have the beard, their pants are above their ankles, they're practicing, they're coming to the masjid all the time, they're praying right. All this is good. But they are the rudest of the people. You have not understood the path properly. You have not abided by the way of the Sahaba properly. Because they were the best in their akhlaq. They were tough people. Right? Everybody knows this. Abu Bakr, subhanallah, even while reciting Surah Fatiha and Salah, he'll start crying. This is how soft his heart was. However, in the battlefield, he was a lion. They knew exactly where to behave how. Right? So, if someone comes, let's suppose, the misbah, the prayer beads. Right? We know from the sunnah, you're supposed to use your fingers. Because your fingers will testify on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Now let's say you see somebody using the prayer beads, and he's making his dhikr this way. Someone who knows that this is wrong, and he comes and grabs him by the shoulder. This is a bid'ah, what are you doing? This is no way to talk to someone for the very first time. You don't do it this way, right? Like look at the Prophet ﷺ, a Bedouin came and he was urinating in the corner of the masjid. Umar radiallahu anhu wanted to chop his head off, right? But the Prophet said, let him finish. After he finished, he told someone, wash it off, and then he explained to the Bedouin. Because he's a Bedouin, he lives in the desert, he has no manners, right? He doesn't understand this stuff. And he explained to him that this is Baytullah. This is not the place where you do such a thing. Right? So you have to you answer the call of nature in a different place, not where we pray. So he explained it. But then in other situations, we know the Prophet ﷺ would get angry. Like for example, a person came to give him bay'ah. He was wearing a ta'weez, right? An amulet. And he said, I don't accept your bay'ah until you take this off. Because this is shirk. So if you say La ilaha illallah, then wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, then what is this that you have in your hand? Take it off. You only believe in one ilah, right? So in aspects of tawheed and shirk, of course he said it right away. But even then, it's not like he started beating the person up. No, he explained it, that this is shirk. If you say La ilaha illallah, you depend on Allah, not some bracelet that you're wearing. The bracelet, it's a creation like you, right? So on and so forth. So if you truly understand the way of the Salaf, the righteous first 3 generations of Muslims, you will also know how to behave in the right way. And that's very important. So when it comes to aspects of Iman, your belief, your actions, and your behavior, that you practice according to the Sahaba and the following two generations. Then we also look at the way the Salaf used to distinguish and make friendship or enmity. They never held personal grudges with anyone. You will not find, let's say when the Prophet ﷺ died, there was 100,000 Sahaba, as Imam al-Dhahabi recorded. You will not find that those 100,000 Muslims held personal grudges with one another for more than 3 days. This is the Sunnah. Like maybe you had a fight with somebody. The Prophet ﷺ said, no believer, no two believers should have a grudge between themselves for more than 3 days. You will not find any of the companions bickering and fighting and abusing each other for years and years and decades. They didn't do this. Problems will happen. People get into disputes. No two people are the same. We know this. Sometimes misunderstanding happen. There were times, if you go through the biographies, Abu Bakr and Umar yelled at each other in front of the masjid. It doesn't only happen in Masjid Taqwa, okay? So Abu Bakr and Umar were yelling at each other in front of the masjid. But immediately, within a matter of minutes, they clarified their misunderstanding, hugged, this, that, and they were the best of the people. They didn't prolong the disputes, right? It's not like that Abu Bakr started gathering some people. Hey, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, take my side. Make sure you don't talk to Umar. Yesterday he did this. And Umar went and started gathering a few more people. And then they made groups against one another. In the history, you will not find that the Sahaba ever did this type of stuff, right? We do that because we don't understand the behavior that we're supposed to have according to the Quran and Sunnah. Disputes will happen. Solve them right away. Just go back, see who's right, who's wrong. Ask a third person you both respect, and that's it. And leave it at that. Don't go beyond that. And this is how you build a relationship. So the Sahaba, they never made enmity with anyone for personal reasons. They hated only for the sake of Allah. If they loved for the sake of Allah. Like for example, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. And he is one of the highest narrators of hadith, right? In the top four companions who narrated the most hadith, right? We have Abu Hurairah, we have Abdullah ibn Umar, we have Aisha radiallahu anha, and who wants to take a guess at the fourth one? Everybody knows the name. Maybe you're feeling shy. All right, maybe I'll give you up to a Q&A. All right, but anyway, so Abdullah ibn Umar was among those four leading narrators of hadith. Okay, so Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, an incident happened later on in his life. I don't recall if it was his son Bilal or it was his son Salim, but it was one of the two. Right? He had one of these two sons, either Bilal or Salim. It was a dispute. He didn't want his wife to go to the masjid. Listen to the dispute. He did not want Bilal or Salim, whichever the sons, I forgot exactly what was the name, because both were his sons. I just don't remember which son this incident happened with. So the son of Abdullah ibn Umar, he said, I don't allow my wife to go to the masjid. Abdullah ibn Umar is the one who narrated the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari from his father. If your wife asks to go to the masjid, do not prevent her. This is a command from the Prophet ﷺ. You cannot prevent your wife to go to the masjid. That she wants to go to the masjid for salah, to learn, you can't prevent her. Right? Culturally speaking, many people are confused. In many countries, I know they don't even have a place for the women. And they think that this is from the deen. No, this is haram to build masajid like this. Masajid have to have places for women, right? How else are the women going to learn if they don't come to the masjid and listen to the lecture? So anyways, Abdullah ibn Umar's son, Abdullah ibn Umar is saying, I'm telling you the sunnah, that this is what the Prophet said. So he said, oh, ya Abi, meaning to Abdullah ibn Umar, you don't know what's going on in the women's section. That was Ayyam al-Rasul. But now you do not know what's going on. All they're doing is gossiping, decorating their khimar and abaya. It's a mess in the women's section. Many women will become more corrupt by meeting some of the women in the masjid. That was his point. But Abdullah ibn Umar, he didn't want to listen. He said, this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. And from that point, Abdullah ibn Umar did not talk to his son. How dare you reject a hadith? He wasn't rejecting it. He was trying to explain that it's a very unsafe situation. I don't want my wife to mix with the wrong type of women and then bring trouble in the house. I'll teach her. He was trying to explain and explain and explain, but Abdullah ibn Umar didn't want to listen. He said, no, the Prophet said, do not prevent your wife from going to the masjid. Fix the masjid situation, that's a different thing. But you should not disobey the rule yourself, right? Then as Abdullah ibn Umar was on his deathbed, the people, his senior students, were saying, you still haven't talked to your son. You can die any moment. And he is here trying to give you salam. He wants to see how you are feeling. And we know that you're on your deathbed. Even at that moment, because he was so upset with his son, how dare you turn away from one word of the Prophet, he replied to the salam. But as Imam al-Dhahabi recorded, Abdullah ibn Umar didn't even turn to look at his son. He just affirmed the salam, and he died in that way. This is how the Sahaba used to make relationship, even if it was their own siblings and whatnot and children. How much of the Quran and Sunnah do you truly cling on to? If you knowingly turn away from something, then whoa, there's a barrier now between me and you. There's a problem here, right? So this is how the Sahaba and those first two generations of people used to form relationships. And that's what made their friendship solid, because they did it for Allah's sake. That they would make friendship with those who are religious, right? And this is what we tell the young people all the time. Find yourself just some masjid buddies that you will go. Sure, you might play if you sit through a lecture for 45 minutes. Maybe for 20 minutes you guys are talking to each other, but at least you'll hear something else, half of it. You'll hear half, the other one next to you will hear the other half, and another, and then together afterwards, the 4 or 5 of you can share the entire lecture. But the point is, you formed a friendship, that your friendship was built upon going to the masjid together, learning, sitting in the lectures together. These are the friendships that will last with you forever. The friendships that you make while seeking knowledge, right? But if you make the friendships outside in the streets, or in the schools and colleges for grades and other haram things and for fayda and this, that, the moment that need is gone, the friend is gone too. Or the moment that friend is in trouble, he'll throw you under the bus as well. Right? But it's the sincere Muslim friend who will come caring, running, rushing to you even when you have family problems, this, that. You'll always find that friend, your masjid friend, that friendship you formed there, that will be the one that will always stick with you sincerely. So this is how our righteous pious predecessors even made friendship. And they also used to be very diligent in spreading the truth, right? And be very diligent upon unity. They never encouraged splitting and this and that. Rather, they always called the Muslims to stay united upon the Quran and the authentic Sunnah, right? And it was during many of their lifetimes like some deviant groups started coming up. The first of them was the Khawarij, this extremist group. The Sahaba, the Prophet ﷺ himself was alive when the leader of the Khawarij came. And the Sahaba were there to teach to the people. The Sahaba were alive when this whole fitna, the split that happened. Right? The Sahaba were alive and knew what type of people were the ones who killed the grandsons of the Prophet ﷺ. The Sahaba were alive when the sect called the Qadariyah came out. They are the ones who denied that there is anything called the Qadr of Allah. Right? So these were some initial groups that came into the Ummah, that spread unfortunately, or became popular. And the Sahaba were very keen on making sure that they taught the people right from wrong. Like Abdullah ibn Abbas has had such intellectual debates with the Khawarij. They weren't people that stayed quiet. They had the knowledge, they cared for the Muslims. that I don't want this brother of mine to be misguided. So they were very diligent, very keen on making sure that whoever they came in contact with, they told them the truth. They never hid it, right? But this is something that unfortunately is missing in our times today. Many people don't say the truth, right? Even as bad as it sounds, we have to speak honestly. You will even find shuyukh and imams sometimes, if they come to a masjid like this where they can openly say these words, they'll say it. If they go to another masjid, they won't say anything. They change from masjid to masjid. But the truth is the truth, right? If Allah blesses you, that you have the knowledge, and then somehow you got invited to a masjid where most of the people, maybe they aren't aware of the right aqidah or the meaning of the sunnah and this and that. Allah chose you to be there to do your best to explain. Maybe that could be the only time that these people will get to hear the truth. You should do your level best in the nicest manner, in the most detailed manner to explain the truth to the people. Even if they throw you off, they throw you off. Look what happened to the Prophet ﷺ himself. People stoned him, threw rocks in Ta'if, right? Threw him out. So if this can happen to Rasulullah ﷺ, then of course it will happen to Imams and Shuyukh and people less than that who are trying to preach the truth. People might smack you, beat you and throw you out. But at least you will meet Allah saying that I tried. That's the point. You don't just stay quietly and just let falsehood widely spread and you do nothing about it. Then you haven't understood the meaning of the Quran and the Sunnah properly. Right? You have to stop evil. You can't let evil spread throughout. Especially if Allah gives you the chance that you can be a guard to protect evil from coming in your environment. If Allah gave you that position, then of course you have to hold on to it even stronger than before. That Allah chose me for this position for a reason. And I can't let fitna spread and all this nonsense come. I have to stay strong and keep fighting for the sake of Allah. Right? So that has to be your intention. Not for personal popularity, but no. I need to help Allah's religion. I need to help Allah's house, whatever may be the situation. You know, different people are in different types of situation. So this is the way we see briefly that what it truly means that you are someone who is trying or striving to follow those first three generations of Muslims. That especially number one, when it comes to aspects of Tawheed and all other aspects of Iman, belief, you stick to it firmly, right? And the biggest excuse people will give, and this is an open challenge, because I know a lot of us, we come from different backgrounds. Somebody may say, well, you know, I'm from Bangladesh and Pakistan, we're mostly Hanafi people. This is a challenge. Go see the Aqidah of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and compare it with the Quran and the Sunnah. Absolutely no difference. So don't let people these days fool you. No, that's, you know, the Wahhabis, Ahlul Hadith people, right? This is what they'll do. But that's not the way. Just open the book and go check. Because most of these terminologies, these scary things, like let's say this term Wahhabi, and inshallah I'll give a lecture soon about the whole biography of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, no problem. But briefly, this term Wahhabi was invented by the British. When they saw that in India, all of us was India at that point, right? There was one country, even parts of Afghanistan was known as Hind. This was how it was. So when the British first came and they saw that some practicing Muslims were giving them resistance, right? They wanted to rise against this British occupation, that kuffar can't just come and take our lands and oppress us and make slaves out of us. So that's when the British invented the term Wahhabi, to scare off the other Muslims from joining them. That no, what? And of course Muslims will be like, what's a Wahhabi? We've never heard of this. So they must be some really weird people. Let's not join them. Let's not listen to them. Right? So this term was first coined by the British, just to keep the Muslims away from gathering together, making their armies bigger, and fighting against the British to throw them out of India. So this is where the term came from. And now the same term has again been popularized over the past 15-20 years by the Americans. Right? The Wahhabis are coming and this and that, and many people get confused. But this is a word that does not exist in any book of fiqh. It's not a madhab. There's no madhab called Wahhabi madhab. It doesn't exist, right? So you have to be aware of these things. But unfortunately people, they fall right into the trap of the British that they left behind, and they'll call you something. And this is what happens. Like subhanAllah, even when I went to Bangladesh a few years ago, just the way I pray, somebody, oh, this guy's a Wahhabi. And I stopped him, hold on, what's a Wahhabi? He's like, I don't know. Then why are you calling me one? Right? So I stopped him. It's like, why are you calling me something that you don't even know what it means? But it's sad that this is the ignorance that's widespread. Just if you do something different that most people haven't seen, but they won't ask you, is this a hadith that you're following? Just ask. Right? But no, this is something I never saw my parents doing. This guy must be a Wahhabi. That's just how they throw this word around. So we have to be mindful of these things and not be scared to explain. Because if you remain ignorant, this is what causes the chaos. Like for example, I remember a couple of years ago, this was all over the news. In one of the towns in Afghanistan, they set a woman on fire. This was all over the news, CNN, BBC, everybody was reporting it. But they reported in a wrong way. Oh, look at Afghanistan, a woman came to the mosque and they burnt her. This is how the Western media. But when you actually look at the real news, what happened was, she was a woman of Taufique. So she went to one of the places where they do grave worshipping and this and that. So she was telling those people that this is shirk. And the people set her on fire. This is the truth, that subhanAllah, a woman who understood what is shirk and tawheed, she stood there to explain to the people, but then they burned her to death. You know? Of course, inshallah ta'ala, she'll have tremendous reward for this in Yawm al-Qiyamah, inshallah. But this is what happens. Sometimes, people really get abused physically, killed even, right? So, but it should not stop us from spreading the truth. And especially in places like this, in these countries, alhamdulillah, no one's gonna do that, right? If you went to masjid there and say, this type of stuff, the mawlid is a bid'ah. Okay, we don't do it. At most, what they're gonna say is, get out of our masjid, don't come back. Okay, big deal. Who cares, right? So that's at most what someone will do. Throw you out of that masjid. Okay, alhamdulillah, I have other masajid where I can go pray. But you tried. Go with kindness. Explain to them that this is the truth, this is the right way to do things, and the wrong way that you want to stay away from. So the Sahaba and the first two generations, they were very diligent. They never gave up. They never gave up trying. If they did, we would not, who knows, we'd still be Hindus. They're the ones who strove hard, and then some Muslims, generations after generations, they understood that and the importance of spreading Islam. That's how many of us, our families, became Muslims, right? Look at Indonesia, Malaysia, when they were doing business with the Arabs, they took that as a chance to give da'wah. And all these countries, the largest populated Muslim country became Muslim after meeting Arab businessmen. Everybody knows that history, right? So this is how you want to be, that you have to be sincere, practice the religion as best as you can, the way the Sahaba understood, then you have done this. And if anybody is confused about these terms, just explain it to them, that these are terms from the Quran and Sunnah, not some weird concept, evil thing that was newly invented, right? So inshallah ta'ala, we'll stop here for tonight. Any questions from the brothers and sisters, as usual, of course, you send your questions down. Go ahead.
Related to the part of the answer, الرسول عليه السلام والسلف الصالح برضه كل الأمر مهم جدا في الموضوع الأساسي إن الإسلام ما وجدش بعد السلف الصالح بس الإسلام استمر لله وانتشر أكثر.
Speak a little louder, because I'm still suffering from ear infection. So.
We know it from the history that Islam spread and became very wide open after Salaf.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
to the India, all this area. This also not only by the guidance of Rasul Islam and Salaf, all Amr also.
Yeah.
Okay, our Khalifa at that time was strict to Deen and Islam and very decent people. To the degree that during Umar ibn Aziz, or 1150,
Yeah.
Anybody wants to make zakah cannot find.
Yeah, there was no poor person.
Nobody can accept those things because everybody was rich and everything was glorious. So, as a third component, also other under, if they are Rashidin, good people, also has a strict.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so what the brother was just saying, subhanAllah, I actually just mentioned this point last week at our EHC lecture, that the one who is a ruler over you, if he really sticks to the book and the sunnah, sticks to the way of the Salaf, Allah also puts a lot of barakah and a positive effect. And he gave the example of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, which many ulama, they said that he is the fifth rightly guided Khalifa. This was like a title of respect for him. And there was so much barakah during the Khilafah of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz that there was no one in the Ummah poor enough to even take zakat. And it went around. There was nobody. And he sent to this governor and that governor. No poor person, no poor. It kept coming back. So that barakah comes with really sticking to the sunnah, sticking to the book, striving hard the way the Sahaba did. And then Allah puts that barakah under any type of leadership, right? Any type of leadership will have that type of barakah, whether it's small or big. So this is, of course, an extremely, extremely important point. But again, it starts with, it's a collective effort. Like if we all, let's say here, like all of us here in this community, if all of us, inshallah ta'ala, understand and get on one page, eventually in the next generation, one of our children will be the leader. And it's granted that he'll be a righteous one and the correct one because we're all on it, right? So the leader gets picked from the people that's there, right? So this is something that's very important. But of course, once you get that position of authority and that person understands the correct manhaj, then he can be very, very effective. Very effective, right? And just as a general knowledge, it was during the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz that the whole sciences of hadith collection is actually when it spread and started. So he was the one who gave means and helped. So all these books that we have, Bukhari and Muslim and all of this came into, that's when it really started, it flourished, that the sciences of hadith collection. Alright, so I got a message from upstairs. It was his Abdullah ibn Umar's son Bilal. Alright, what age should a child be circumcised? Well, this is of course as early as possible. Even if you want to do it within the first couple of days, not a problem. Or first week or whatever may be the case. The circumcision, you want to do it as early as possible, right? Because it becomes more difficult. In our Bengali culture, they have a party for the circumcision. So you'll find 10-year-olds getting circumcised for the first time because there's 5-6 sheep waiting to be slaughtered. Right? So that's not really good, and it only causes him more pain, which we all know, right? So you don't have to necessarily wait for the circumcision party. Just do it right away as soon as possible. Because that is from the sunnah, you want to do it as early as possible and not delay. Any other question? Yeah.
During the lecture, I pick a bit. Three generations is the best among the Ummah. Sahabai Karam, Tabi'in, Tabi'in.
Yeah.
But my question is that the great dispute is what I'm going to tell you. The great massacre means massacre Karbala happens in the time of Sahabai Karam.
Yeah.
At that time they are alive. So how you get ability?
Yeah, so the brother is asking, like, of course, we understand and affirm that the first 3 generations were the best of the Muslims, but then also we had incidents like Karbala, where, the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ was killed. These type of things happened when the Sahaba were alive. So how do we understand between these 2 different situations? Well, if you look at it, those type of things happened because a group of people decided to leave the understanding of the Sahaba. They are the ones who separated away, right? I mean, who else is going to attack the Sahaba unless someone who really is astray, right? So this is what happened. But the term, let's say what the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that the best of the people are my generation. Those who believed in him, followed him, and this and that, right? So it doesn't mean that the Sahaba's understanding was wrong. It was the people who turned away from the Sahaba that were the wrong, and this is what happened. That because they split, the shaitan took them so far away that they even ended up killing the Prophet's own family members, right? And his grandkids, because they split from the understanding. Like, for example, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, when he was in Iraq, there's a narration, he had heard that some people were sitting in a circle and making dhikr with stones. So let's say there's a circle of 6-7 people. So they're using stones. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Like, many places they do it, unfortunately. So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he heard about this. And he was very upset. It's like, why would people introduce this bid'ah when the Sahaba of Rasulullah ﷺ are still alive? But Abdullah ibn Mas'ud just didn't take word from people and make a judgment. He actually went after Salat al-Isha one night. He put a cloak over himself. He went with a cloak over himself and went to the masjid to see that gathering with his own eyes, if this was true or not, what he had heard from the people. So when he saw that this is what the people were doing, that they're gathering and making this weird type of dhikr using stones and this and that in group and sitting in circles, that's when he revealed himself. And everybody knows who he is. And he said, what's wrong with you people? That the Sahaba of Rasulullah ﷺ are still alive and you're introducing new types of ibadah? You could just ask us. This is a bid'ah. And then Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said that, Wallahi, from that gathering, some of them were fighting in the Khawarij army. So a small bid'ah like that, eventually led to the person to be fighting against the Sahaba. Right? So this is why it is very important that you refrain the shaitan. Right? Because shaitan makes you start step by step. Then he'll eventually take you into far, far astray to the point that you're just completely away from the deen, right? So everything starts in very small aspects. That's why it's very important that every aspect of the sunnah we want to clarify. If there's anything that's a bid'ah, we want to understand it properly and stay away from it. Because even the smallest of bid'ah can lead someone to something far greater in the years to come, because the shaitan will use that, right? But those people, going back to sum it up, those people who actually fought against the Sahaba, there were people who didn't understand. They left that understanding. The people who killed Hassan and Hussein, we know their understanding and the way they used to think, right? Like, for example, there's a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, Abdullah ibn Umar is the narrator. The people, Ahlul Kufa, they came and were asking Abdullah ibn Umar about, is it halal to kill flies? Right? This is their question. So Abdullah ibn Umar said, look at these people. They killed the grandson of the Prophet, and now they're asking, is it halal to kill flies? Right? Where's your understanding? Because they didn't understand the Quran properly. Right? It's like, how can you think this way? You're boasting about killing the grandson, but then you're afraid, I don't want to kill a fly. Right? So these type of things only happen because people leave the understanding of the Sahaba, and then they fell into that wrong. Yeah, it's a test from Allah too. And obviously, them going through these trials is also a lesson for us, right? This is why, like, look at the trials of the Anbiya. They were the best of the people, yet they faced the most trial. It doesn't mean they were wrong, but the people who rejected them were the ones causing them problems, right? So this is right. Does this mean that Imam Abu Hanifa, Shafi, Malik, and Imam Ahmed were all Salafis? Yes, this is what they did. They used to preach, and the Aqidah of the Salaf, they used to always call people that you go back to the Quran, you go back to the Prophet ﷺ and his Sahaba. None of them, neither of these, any of these four, ever said anything different. That they knowingly never said, "Oh, reject what Abu Bakr is saying and follow me," or something like that. All of them used to teach their students the exact same thing, right? Now, based on information, certain fiqhi issues here and there ended up being different, but the aqidah, the understanding, the approach to the religion was the same for all four. And they were very vocal that we have to follow those first three generations, the Sahaba, the Tabi'un. Right? So this is openly known, right? Even if people try to hide it nowadays, but this is well documented, very well documented, that the Imams were properly on this Aqidah, right? The Aqidah of the Salaf. Any other question? Sure.
Nobody has question? Okay.
Okay, all right. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
And, I would like to talk about politics, but related to Daesh and other stuff.
Yes.
I believe that there is lost terminology here. You know, if somebody says these people are terrorists or something,
Yeah.
in another person it is they are freedom fighter at the same time. So I never involved in politics question, and I don't like to increase here.
Yeah, no, but this question is fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Anyway, but if somebody, let us say, volunteered to go to the East, and he, in his mind, not other people's opinion, what they say about him first,
Yeah.
he could be a freedom fighter. Could be somebody has consciousness in his heart and study history, saw these people in this land,
Yeah.
oppressed, abused, killed, tortured by foreigners, most of their history, and just hope himself to be defending this issue. It will be right or wrong or right or yes or not really. Prove that when I was about 4 years ago, a guy from Japan, his name is Komoto, joined three Palestinians and eject the European Israeli and lived in the Tel Aviv, Israel. 1968 exactly.
Yeah.
And they brought up because with themselves since after 2 days they found no use, they would reach to release or agreement with Israel. And the guy during this period before the destroy was it, to kill all Israel on it, he says that I raised in Japan, I speak Japanese, I have no relation with Arab or Palestinian or Muslim, but I found myself finding people oppressed, abused in the land, taking them, their homes, they're destroyed, and why?
Yeah.
He offered himself to be, by the language of Quran, a freedom fighter or humanitarian, although it's not Muslim. So we cannot involve everything that terrorists and terrorists, we still oppress people.
Yeah. So okay, they can't hear the questions. I'll repeat it. So so the brother's asking about, like, of course we know, let's say a lot of the oppressed Muslims who are fighting, we understand some of them are Daesh, but many others are actual freedom fighters. So how do we reconcile between the two? Well, this is something that and he specifically meant, like, if somebody from here goes there to help out, he wants to help the oppressed Muslims, this and that. So how do we can't just label everybody the terrorist or part of Daesh. How would we reconcile between the two? Now this is something, as the ulama mentioned, if you're in that situation, this is a different situation, right? Let's suppose, Allah forbid, let's say right now we're not in Atlantic City, we're somewhere in Afghanistan, and people barge in trying to kill you and kill your family, this, that. Of course, you don't just sit there and say, okay, just kill us all. No, you're going to fight. right? And this is even American law. If somebody barges into your house, by law, you're allowed to fight that person. But when it comes to issues, the way that things are, as the ulama mentioned, that it's complete chaos. In a lot of situations, people don't know who they're even fighting and why they're even fighting and who they're killing, because there's so much confusion. So in a situation like this, when there is utter confusion, the one who is living in that state, he has to protect himself from all the enemies, whether it be some Shia or some Khawarij or some confused Sunni or British American soldiers, whatever it is. He has to independently protect himself and his family and his house, right? But from the outside, everything is a complete mix. You're not for sure, like let's say everybody formed patches of groups. There's a lead general here, another general there, another general there. Everybody's making takfir on everyone and everybody's fighting everyone. So in that type of situation, the best thing a Muslim is supposed to do, you stay away from the fitna, because you don't want to meet Allah. What if I was the wrong and I killed an innocent Muslim? This is not a chance that you should take on Yawm al-Qiyamah, right? So this is why the ulama, they said, stay away from the confusion. But of course, the oppressed people, you can help them in different ways. With the food, with the medication, with clothing and this and that. Like to help the oppressed Muslims, it's not just limited to go fight in a confusing state. You can help the Muslims in so many different ways, right? So you do your part in a way that you're sure about that this is the right thing to do, right? No one's going to say that sending money for the poor Syrian children, orphan children, for their food and clothing is wrong. No one. We all know that that's the right thing to do, right? But going there fight, you have Alawi groups, you have this group, you have that group. What group am I going to go fight for as a foreigner? You have no idea who's right, who's wrong, or what's going on, right? So when it's like that it's infighting, Muslims killing one another, we know the hadith that when two Muslims meet and raise the sword, the qatil and the maqtul both are in Jahannam. So we know that hadith. I don't want to be part of it, right? So we help in other ways. So this is just the times of fitna, complete times of confusion. We just have to, keep making dua to Allah and do our best and make sure that we don't make the fitna more. Right? We stay over. Okay, inshallah, last question. Yeah, so same thing about the rebellion and all the things that happened. So this is a similar related question, that when it comes to a lot of the rebellion that we saw against the Amir, and it caused more chaos than good, right? This is again from the Sunnah, that you look at the Sahaba, that in times of fitna they stayed patient. Like you look at Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, who was the governor of Iraq, and he even killed Sahaba, right? He even killed Sahaba. But he was the Amir of Iraq. People like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was alive, Abdullah ibn Umar was alive, all these younger Sahaba were now old. And people were looking to them, that should we not go and fight Hajjaj? As I know, this goes against the Sunnah. We have to be, as the hadith mentioned, even if your Amir whips you and takes your mal unjustly, have sabr. Because once you rise up, what will follow is far more chaotic. And this is exactly what has happened, right? Let's say Syria. We know Bashar is a kafir. He's Alawi. Alawiyya is Kufr al-Akbar. We know this. But for the past 30, 40 years, people were oppressed, but people could still. Syria was one of the most popular tourism sites in the world. People were oppressed, but there was peace overall. But now you made him angry. Look what has happened in the past 5-6 years. 500,000 people. He doesn't care. He's an animal. Okay, you guys want to rebel against me? Okay, I'll show you. 500,000 people dead, millions of children orphaned. It created more of a mess. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, he always said, and the Sahaba stuck to this, that even if the Amir is corrupt, just have sabr. Because rising against the Amir, it will bring more problems, right? In Morocco, you had the king who used to say, he grabbed the mufti or one of the big sheikhs, gave a fatwa that you don't have to fast in Ramadan, so they can work. Tunis, sorry, yeah. But this was years ago, right? So this is the situation. But rising up, it just causes more chaos, which is what we clearly saw in many of the Arab countries overall. All the Arab brothers had to do was ask the Bengalis and Pakistanis what happens when there's political fights in the country, because they've been going through it for 40 years, right? The whole country gets destroyed. But this is unfortunate. We just have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save us and not put us in these type of situations. But that is one of the really major aspects of the understanding of the Salaf in our day and age, that the fitna is widespread, rebellion and rising and this and that. We have to really have patience and just stick to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask Allah to aid those people who are in the situation, to help them in whatever means, inshallah. Alright.